But nobody's going to be crazy enough to do space, so I better do space, as Elon Musk once said, empathizing his disruptive visions. Well, today I want to share with you how hubris manifests itself in the behavior of startup founders, and specifically discuss the paper Hubristic Startup Founders, the neglected bright and inevitable dark manifestations of hubristic leadership in new venture creation processes. The paper was written by Janina Sundermeier, Martin Gersch and Jörg Freiling. Professor Sundermeier, who will join our session next class, is a professor of business administration, in particular digital entrepreneurship and diversity at Freie Universität Berlin. Her research interests lie at the intersection of entrepreneurship, management and business informatics. Martin Gersch is a professor of business administration at the School of Business and Economics at Freie Universität Berlin. Among his research fields are digital transformation, with a particular focus on new business models, service innovations and implications of platform economies. Jörg Freiling is a professor at the Faculty of Business Studies and Economics at Bremen University. The scope of his research interests surrounds entrepreneurship, management and organizations. The paper was published in July 2020 in Volume 57, Issue 5 of the Journal of Management Studies, a highly ranked journal that publishes innovative empirical and conceptual articles that advance knowledge of management and organization. This journal has a VHP factor of A and an impact factor of 4.888. Since the paper was published recently, it has so far only been cited once. This article can be described as empirical qualitative and is organized as follows. The authors provide a brief introduction to the topic by pointing out the limited scope of current research on hubristic leadership. This is followed by an overview of prior literature in order to establish a conceptual background for the development of their theoretical framework. In the next section, they discuss the challenges they face, their methodological approaches, and how they analyze their data. Finally, they present their findings and end the paper with a brief conclusion. According to the authors, previous literature has failed to provide an unbiased examination of the characteristics of hubristic leadership behavior in startups. By highlighting both beneficial and detrimental features, the authors aim to comprehensively examine the effectiveness of hubristic leadership behavior, and thus to expand the scope of hubristic entrepreneurship theory. The paper focuses on answering the question of how hubris manifests itself in the behavior of startup founders as they explore and exploit new venture opportunities. Intending to help stakeholders to mitigate damaging consequences of hubristic leadership behaviors while simultaneously fostering beneficial ones. Broadly speaking, hubris refers to a temporary psychological disposition triggered by an individual's power and characterized by several cognitive and personality dimensions. Numerous empirical studies show that hubristic decision-makers significantly overestimate their own talents and abilities, and therefore neglect important aspects such as environmental conditions or operational concerns. They are also more prone to corporate risk-taking, entrepreneurial illegitimacy, misuse of human, social and financial capital, corporate social irresponsibility, and financial misreporting. Only recently it was shown they also have positive effects on entrepreneurial innovation and leadership. Yet all of these findings were generated in established organizations, while empirical findings of startup founders are still scarce. To address this gap, the authors have drawn on classical economic and entrepreneurial theories. 4 formally distinct functions are used to frame the study. First, innovation. Second, risk management. Third, internal coordination. And fourth, arbitrage. Innovation and risk-taking are exploratory in nature. Innovation involves the creation of visionary scenarios designed to assemble and mobilize support. This exploration of innovation potential requires entrepreneurs to absorb uncertainty by identifying and assessing and managing risk. The other 2 functions cover the exploitative part of entrepreneurship. Internal coordination requires entrepreneurs to initiate, sustain, and grow a profit-oriented enterprise and involves the coordination of resources. The external counterpart is the arbitrage function, which involves the discovery and exploitation of profit opportunities. This function requires the entrepreneur's oversight and accumulation of knowledge about sources of supply, market conditions, and customer segments, as well as the ability to secure the commitment of external stakeholders. Due to the difficulty in finding sufficient and unbiased interviewees, the authors decided to rely on the narratives of investors, startup advisors, and coaches. The 27 interviewees were selected based on their experience, the number of startups they have worked with, and whether they were active in the Berlin startup ecosystem. In preparation for the unstructured interview, the experts were asked to reflect on their experiences with founders who displayed excessive pride, overly positive self-assessment, and arrogance. To ensure that the experts had indeed observed hubris, the authors included 2 validity checks. In addition, the expert narratives were supplemented by 2 in-depth case studies of hubristic entrepreneurs. Let me provide a brief summary of the cases. Karl decided to build a mobile application based on his gut instinct. Although he managed to sell the app for more than was feasible at the time, the project failed after he neglected important issues such as finances, timing, and resources. However, Karl's co-idea was later successfully developed by his developers. Mark founded an innovative radio station. As he wanted to broadcast to a larger audience, he needed an official license. After his official broadcasting license was denied due to his lack of reputation and financial planning, he and his team occupied the offices of media authorities. His efforts resulted in considerable media coverage, which led to another entrepreneur offering Mark a collaboration. While Mark agreed, he failed to adequately review the terms of the contract, which ultimately led to his voluntary departure from the company. Despite everything, the radio station still operates today, successfully. Building on their conceptual framework and data, the authors claim that hubristic startup founders exhibit both negative as well as positive behaviors. Several experts highlighted the visionary power of hubristic founders, which is particularly beneficial during the startup process. However, it also became clear that hubristic founders are highly unlikely to ever question their business ideas once they've begun to implement them. About risk management. Hubristic founders perceive resilience is shown to drive business activities. Yet, the data also suggests the neglection of potential risks because hubristic founders tend to perceive themselves as invulnerable. In terms of internal coordination, hubristic founders are often attributed social potency, referring to the ability to positively influence their employees' motivation and belief in their vision. Still, their egocentricity regarding internal decisions can also lead to problems once employees realize they are prone to not listen to feedback. About arbitrage. Overall, the data suggests that hubris facilitates the initiation of strategic partnerships with external stakeholders, but hinders the leadership of employees in developing long-term commercialization efforts, as hubristic founders do not seem to pay sufficient attention to external market conditions. In challenging the inherent association of hubris with unfavorable leadership outcomes, the paper has extended the scope of the research on hubris. Hubris equips founders with the courage necessary to exploit identified innovation potentials despite the considerable likelihood of entrepreneurial failure. These findings and contributions have several practical implications for hubristic startup founders and stakeholders affected by the impact of hubristic leadership. It is recommended that aspiring founders and their potential stakeholders should get educated about hubris. Using regular updates, practitioners should provide honest feedback and monitor the responsiveness of founders in the face of potentially harmful risks. If self-reflection does not work and founders do not change their minds, collaboration should be abandoned before it is too late. The study has several limitations, though, and opens up questions that should be addressed in future research. First, hubris was defined through third parties. Second, the validity of the CSAE scale has not been supported by any empirical examination in the literature to date. Thirdly, the underlying conceptualization suggests that hubris is a temporary psychological disposition that diminishes when power fades. Little is known, however, about the variations in the level of hubris during the venture creation process. Thirdly, the interpretation of the empirical data was highly dependent upon the author's theoretical perspective and framework. And furthermore, the study remains silent on gender aspects. Simply put, the paper broadens the understanding of how hubris is manifested in leadership behaviors that guide the exploration and exploitation of innovation potentials in startup contexts. And it shows us that hubristic leadership in new venture creation also has its bright sides. Yet there is still a need for more data and future studies to really understand hubristic founders. I hope you liked the presentation. Thank you for listening and see you in class next Wednesday.